Alrighty everybody, welcome in. My name is Joe and today we're going to play some chess. So my opponent leads off with e4. We're just going to follow along with kind of the same e5 position that we typically do. We just mirror. This is a pretty standard opening that we're familiar with. We know how to process here. My opponent goes into the Italian game, and what I recommend on the Italian game is, just mirror, just copycat what they're doing at this point in time. This is the Gioco Piano version of the Italian game, and from here we expect to see one or two of these pawn pushes. These are the kind of staple moves at this point in time. The idea being that, okay, so a little bit different, a little bit off book, but nothing to be concerned about. This pawn is defended, so there's really no challenge here. But what we are going to do is we're just going to continue our development. And so the goal here is to get our knight developed. We're going to get castled, get safe, and then from there we'll look how the position develops. Typically in the Italian or the Gioco Piano, you see this pawn push, a central break here is kind of a theme. A lot of times there's just a bunch of tension sitting along there. People don't actually do a lot of captures at that point in time, hence the name Gioco Piano, Italian for the quiet game, because you don't see a lot of trades until people get maneuvered. Now, this move, notice, comes with a double attack on my F pawn, which is the weakest pawn on the board for black side of the things. But the reason we developed the way we did and we got our knight out, notice we have blocked in our queen, so we can't capture here, but that's okay. That's why this order, we do bishop and then knight, because now we can just castle. And notice this is now defended. And if my opponent wants to trade away both of his pieces for my rook, that is okay. And we're going to let him do just that. So this is a bit scary at times, right? Oh no, we've lost all these pieces. But in reality, black is completely fine here. There is really no danger whatsoever. In fact, we're just going to keep developing. One of the things I'm looking at now is a central break. I'd like to get my bishop developed, and I'd like to get my other rook into the game. This central break is kind of looking at me right now. Notice I have 1-2 defenders in that square. My opponent has 1-2 defenders in that square. So I can park my pawn there, and it should be okay. I just have to look at, would my queen be hanging at the end of that line? And no, because I have this knight falling back. So let's go for it. Let's see what happens. From the black side of the board, one of my challenges is knowing when to push the D pawn. It's one of the things that I'm trying to focus on getting better at, is when do I push the D pawn? When do I push it 1 square versus 2 squares? When do I go for this attack? When do I not? It's something that I have not been able to memorize the exact circumstances where one is better than the other. Okay, so my knight is pinned, right? And my opponent's looking to essentially break up this structure. And that's okay. I'm just going to continue with my plan. Should I close down? Okay, let's take a look at this. Should I grab or should I close down? If I grab, opponent captures. My opponent can capture back with tempo and fork my bishop at the end of that. All right, what if I push and keep it closed? My opponent could grab here. I could grab back. And then my opponent would have to do something with this knight. Where could this knight go? Well, the knight has got a nice place here. It's not a fork. Or do I retreat the bishop? One of the other things is I could look at something along this line. Okay, hear me out. Sacrifice a bishop. My opponent basically grabs back. I jump the knight up with check again, and then I pick up the bishop at the end of that line. Is that a possibility? I don't know. Let's take a look at it for real quick. Captures. Does my opponent have anything else to capture back with? No, no. And if they leave it there, if he does nothing and just leaves it there, well then, I can just retreat it. No harm, no foul. If he grabs, then I bring with the knight. And now what happens when we bring the knight here with check? Can my opponent do anything about this? Ah, yes, nope. That's covered, that's covered. So let's go for it, right? What the heck? Well, let's be aggressive. Let's see what develops from here, right? We're just playing a fun game. Let's see how it develops. If my opponent grabs, we know that we're going to grab with the knight. I mean, we're going to give him check with the knight. And like I said, at the end of that line, we pick up the bishop. So our sacrifice really isn't a sacrifice. We do drop a pawn at the end of all that. Okay. So, now what? There's nothing else to do other than just retreat the bishop back, right? I just have to make sure that I still have an available square for my knight to retreat to, should my opponent grab the pawn here. And in fact, I don't. So let's go ahead and bring the bishop all the way back. Yeah, it feels good. Okay, so now everything is covered, right? If my opponent grabs here, I do have a way to get my knight rotated around, still be in the game, still defend everything. So I could, in fact, lose a pawn, but I've gained a pawn. Both my opponent and I's king is a little bit weak, right? If the queen moves, there's this, right? But that's not really a great move, but it is a fork to keep in the back of our mind, should we ever need it. All right, and now let's see here. What do we want to do? First thing would be to get our bishop involved somewhere, somehow. The question is where. I have access to this pawn, and I could, you know what, that wouldn't be that bad of a trade. It would still keep my king in the center of the board. No, whoa, 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 don't hit that right. Whoa, can't forget about that, Joseph. Can't forget about that. That would have been a mistake, wouldn't it? I could push here, offer the en passant. I'm not in love with that, though. What if we just start with this move, right? So we develop our queen, keeping an eye on the knight, but we've removed ourselves from the pin. So now the knight can move if we want it to. Now, I don't know in this case where it would move to. Something like this looks very juicy, but I don't have access to the h5 square. Is there a way to get it here? No, we have to eliminate this pawn first, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. But the other option would be maybe to rotate the bishop up and maybe trade off here. No, because then that puts a pawn here. All right, what about this? Here we go. There's a knight maneuver we might be able to work. There's a knight maneuver we might be able to get involved with. We could also look at maybe pushing this pawn. No, that still doesn't work because there's too many defenders in that square. So a lot of things to think about in this game. All right, so my opponent is going for a very good move. But you know what? I think I can just take, though, can't I? I think I can just take. Do I have to be concerned about this? With check. No, because I've got it covered. So that's fine. That worked out great. I'm happy with that. So what's next on the board? Ah, he took away my square here, though. But it's time to get this bishop involved. This bishop needs to get moved into the game somehow, somewhere. And this is defended. You know, we've got everything defended. Our queen is a little mer, our king is a little mer, but, you know, let's hide our king down here. Maybe get our other rook involved in the game this way. But now we've got everything sort of developed, right? We've sort of stabilized the position a little. Yeah, so we know that we have to come back this way, and then we know that we're going to get trapped. So we're going to lose the knight if we're not careful. Is there a way to... Yes. No. Check. The king moves underneath. We're safe. If the king moves here, because if the king moves underneath the eye, then we'll have time to move our knight safely. If we go here with check, when the king moves here, do we have anything good? No. There's no good moves at that point in time. All right, so our knight is a little right now. We need to figure out what to do with this knight in a way that is acceptable. If he pushes here, we're boned. Because we don't even have check anymore. So if we go check first, I'm gonna run out of time if I'm not careful here. So if we go check first, and the king moves this way, you know what we could do is we could just go for a counterattack. Let's do it. All right, so we're gonna go for a counterattack. This is a theme here. I can't stop this, right? My knight, I'm gonna drop my knight. So what's the best thing I can get for my knight? We're gonna get a bishop out of the knight as well. It'll give us another turn for my opponent to make a decision. I'm running low on time, so I'm gonna have to start picking up the pace here. If my opponent goes here, then I'm just gonna bring my queen this way. There's no light square bishop, so I don't have to worry about getting pinned. That's easy enough. And then we're gonna go here. Actually, we can go here now. We might be able to find us a quick mating net in here somewhere. Alright, this comes with check. Actually, can we do anything more? This is a discovered check. We can pick up the bishop for free with our discovered check here. So might be able to do something with this. I was looking to see what the better option would be, maybe to just pick up a pawn with check, but picking up a free bishop seems to be really nice. Ooh, clever, 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 clever. So now let's go this way. See if we can drive our opponent off of this particular piece. If he goes, well, he can't go there. There's not much of, I don't see a mating net yet, but I'm keeping my eye out. Make sure this attack, if I have to trade, I trade. It's not the end of the world. And even if my opponent trades this way, I'm fine with that because that opens up my rook. Let's see where they go from here. Notice I'm not going to pick up the rook, obviously, because don't want to give up my queen in the process, but maybe I can just pick up a pawn this way. I don't know. There's got to be something here. So my opponent could come up the board. I'm just looking to see if there's anything interesting that I could do. Okay, so that way... you see, that just drops the whole bishop. Is there checkmate here? That's covered, that's covered. Then my opponent would just slide the bishop around. So let's just pick up the bishop first. Notice we've got all this covered with our two bishops. So this is covered, these are all covered. Something like this becomes checkmate real fast. So let's just mark out what's covered so we can see if we have a mating net. And because the queen is still there, it's blocking the show. My opponent, yeah. Okay, so we're just gonna go... I'm gonna take with the king, I think, is the best move. Yeah, that gets us a little bit more defensive. Is there anything that's covered? That's not covered. No, all right, let's just take with the king. I'm debating on, or if I just take with the bishop, then the rook comes over. All right, let's just take with the king, and let's just be done with it. So this move, I'm gonna have to start moving my king back. My king is obviously a little exposed, but, you know, just trying to keep things in consideration. This is the only move that I'm really worried about right now. I'd have to come this way, yeah, and I think this just loses on the spot. King can't come this way, can't come this way, and the king can't block. So, good game, well played to my opponent. My opponent, was a provisional rating. I never look before the game, because I don't want to get into the habit of getting into my own head a little bit. So, let's just take a quick look at this game. We'll do a quick analysis from the very beginning. I'm going to turn on the Opening Explorer because this is a very textbook opening. This is very much what I recommend for people to play. And then we've got the king's pawn push, right? The e4 pawn. And then we follow that up with getting our knight developed with tempo. And from black's point of view, we develop our knight defending. And then white continues on developing this bishop, either to the c4 or the b5 squares, either the Italian game or the Roy Lopez, also known as the Spanish game. My opponent for the Italian game. So here we are in the Italian game, and from the Italian game, there's a few things you could do, but what I recommend is for us beginners is just to mirror it. Go into the Gioco Piano, the quiet game, and then you'll see the most common moves for white from this position is, like I said, a pawn push, or a pawn push, or castling. In fact, c3 versus castling is by far the most common. d3 is less common. The Gioco Pianissimo, but you can transpose into the Gioco Pianissimo from this move anyway, and you can, like I said, you can transpose back into the Gioco Pianissimo, the even quieter game. The idea being that white is just slowly building up pressure, step by step, little by little, just putting their pieces on good squares and letting black make the mistake. Now in this particular case, my opponent played a different moveset, one I'm not familiar with, and then just made a few mistakes moving on to the endgame. But that's okay. That's something that they can learn in their journey, right? They've got a nice opening they've developed, right? This is a very nice opening repertoire. The other one you can see is a straight-up castle. And again, for black, the idea is to go ahead and get this knight developed. So for black, Once that bishop comes out, we get our bishop. Keep this square covered in case our opponent tries to jump in. And then as they develop, and as they develop, let's say they castle, you're going to continue with your knight. And so now you're ready to castle. And so just like in this game, when this knight jumped in, we were able to castle. This is an even-ish trade. In fact, let's look at what the analysis says from here, how the game went. So my opponent went knight c3. I'm not familiar with knight c3. It is still on the list of things you could play. b4 is what's known as the Evans Gambit. It's a fun opening that you see from time to time. The idea being that you're trying to chase this bishop. Go ahead and capture the Evans, and then the idea is they are going to push this pawn. Now you're blockaded, now your bishop has to return, and you can either come back or you can go this way. You know, there's lots of things you could do. But anyway, I don't play the Evans Gambit. I don't know the Evans Gambit. I just know that you're supposed to capture that first pawn. All right, but my opponent played with knight c3. Again, I'm not familiar with this particular move order, but that's okay. I don't have to worry about it. I know my plan from black is simply to develop the knight. That way, if my opponent does exactly what they did in the game, which was immediately jump down for a double attack on this pawn, we can just castle. And let's turn the engine on and see what the evaluation says. The evaluation is saying black is slightly ahead at this point in time. Not much, but slightly ahead. And that's a big deal, you know, on move, what are we on, move 4 of the game? No, move 5. So we've just completed move 5 of the game, and black has shifted the balance. It's still an evenish game, but instead of starting out, right, every game starts out with a slight advantage for white because white has the first move. And you can see even all this is a slight teeny tiny advantage for white. That's okay. We shift a few more moves, and then from this position you see black has a little bit of an advantage. It's not much, but it's just a little bit to show that this is an even position. Now, once my opponent takes, you can see the evaluation immediately changes. Because even though if we count the material on the board, 3 points, 3 points, and they trade that for 1 and 5, so it's a 6-point swap. Totally fine, right? From the mathematical standpoint, it's 6 points of material, it's an even position. But when we look at the engine immediately says that this is not a sound move. Don't do this. And from here, you can see, wow, black has an overwhelming advantage at this point in time. A pretty strong advantage, I shouldn't say overwhelming, but a pretty strong advantage even for us beginners. Now, we are going to lose that advantage and we're going to make mistakes, but that's okay. We've gotten through an opening with an advantage, all right? So if you're playing white from this position, once your opponent castles, this attack fizzles. And so this knight becomes a little weakly placed. You'll notice the most common move here is to defend that knight. Notice there's no pin, so I can move my knight whenever I want. This pawn, it's black could, let's say white does something like this. You could think, oh, hey, I could grab, you know, and then you get the center fork trick. But as you see from the engine, if you grab, you know, there's another knight there defending. But my opponent decided to make this exchange, and as we shift from beginners to intermediates and from intermediates to experts, we'll recognize that 2 pieces for 1 rook is not a good trade. Yes, there was an extra pawn thrown in there for free, but it's still not a good trade. The person giving up the rook, in this case black, me, ends up in a better position than the person giving up 2 pieces. So hold on to your 2 pieces and give away your rook if you have to. So that's what we did. So I gave away my rook, and I took my opponent's pieces. I'm in a better position. Now from here, my opponent started to play, you know, make some of these same moves, which is fine. These are good moves. My opponent probably should have castled at this point in time. This probably, if we look at what the engine says, no. The most common move from here is castle or d3. All right, so my opponent did make the best move. Go figure. Oops. From here, I pushed d5, and like I said, I didn't know if this was a good move or not. And you know what? It says it's number here on it's number 3 on the list, so about even to the other moves. d5. Actually, yeah, okay, it's up there. Yeah, it's up there as a good move. So okay. I never know when it's a good option. But in this case, my opponent did find this fantastic bishop move that I didn't expect. but it was a good move. Still keeps my queen pinned. So I didn't know if I should push this outside h-pawn. It's kind of a slow move, and my opponent could simply retreat. And it weakens my already weak king side. I don't know if that's important or not at this point in time. My king is already weakened, right? Like, we've already kind of weakened up. But, you know, if I just slide my king back here, no harm, no foul, move on with life. Yes, the f-file is open, but I could slide a rook into there, and that'd be good, right? So I didn't know exactly what I should do at this point in time. My sacrifice, not a good move. This is the line I was looking for. But at the end of the day, he's got that. And now if we count the material on the board, I have 2 pieces, my opponent has 2 pieces, and 2 rooks. So I've given back my piece. Yeah, I didn't think about that, you know what? At the end of all this, capture, capture, capture. Oh no, that doesn't work that way. Yeah, bishop up would be better. Okay, so that would have been a better move. This is what I was looking at. Capture, capture, capture. Let's just count the material now. 1 piece and 2 rooks. So basically, I'm down in exchange, right? We've got these even, and we've got these. Yeah, so I went from up in exchange to down, or up a little bit to down a little bit, or down a lot, really. So, you know what? Big mistake on my part. Big mistake on my part. I didn't calculate it far enough, but I got lucky, and my opponent made a mistake, so... the lesson to be learned here, whenever we make a mistake, we want to learn a lesson. So what is a lesson I'm taking away from this? The lesson I'm taking away is I didn't calculate far enough. And if I'm going to go for these crazy attacking sacrifices, I had best calculate those extra steps. I just saw this, and I saw, you know, okay, yep, that's covered. And I saw if my opponent moves, then that's covered. So I felt really happy, but what I didn't recognize was, yeah, that's covered. But then that still drops my queen at the end of the day, and yeah, no bueno. All right, so backing up to the game as it was played. Mistake on my part. My opponent thankfully missed it, so that's good. And then the best move from here is to retreat the bishop. Which we did. We went all the way back, which, you know, back to b6. The engine says it's okay, but bishop back to c5 would have been better. I'm wondering if it meant to bring it around here. Let's see, bishop c5, yeah, bishop to e6. No. Bishop to h4? No, okay, yeah, I don't know. Interesting. I'm counting, I'm trying to count out a line and I don't see it. That's okay. All right, moving on. So I retreated my bishop all the way back. My opponent took the pawn, and the engine doesn't like it, but that's okay. From here, I decided to, gosh, I hate when this thing gets all messed up here. I decided to go knight d4, just bring my knight in. And the engine says that actually just going for this, so the same kind of concept of threaten and threaten, trade off pieces, because yeah, my knight did become a little bit of a liability here. It did get trapped a little bit. But I'm up so much at this point in time that I felt okay. Yeah, see, now that this pin no longer exists, this move is not nearly as strong, right? That would have been stronger earlier when my opponent had the chance. But now it just doesn't become very strong. Yeah, and you can see the idea of going ahead and getting in here and attacking that bishop right away. That's funny that the engine says I have a -6, but when I make my next move, then it says -7. So it's just not done calculating yet, and you can see I've only got it set to go to about 25 to 28 deep. Any more than that, it just takes a long, long time to calculate. Yeah, so from here, was there any way to save this knight? I just want to look at what my thought process was, the lines that I was evaluating. Did I spot the good lines or did I miss the good lines? So we spotted queen over, probably a little too late. We spotted bishop check. Did not spot just retreat the queen, but we did spot, retreat the king, but we did spot knight b5. So we spotted the three of the main lines, so I feel pretty good that we evaluated them on their effectiveness. Now the engine says that this queen move would have been the best move, and I decided to go for the third best move, and the knight to b5 was the fourth. So I decided to go for this check. Yeah, this, unfortunately, my opponent just gave up a free pawn and did not help themselves at all. Blocking this check, it's an undefended pawn, so it was a free pickup. So from here, my opponent probably... Yeah, we were calculating what happens if the opponent goes there, but that just becomes... Oh, that becomes checkmate in one. Why is that checkmate in one? Oh, because the bishop covers, the knight covers, and in check... And it's a double check, so you can't even just capture the knight because that doesn't stop the bishop. Wow, I would have missed that. And in fact, I think later in the game I might have missed it. Now I'm thinking about it. All right, so this was just a mistake by my opponent, unfortunately. And then, yeah, now we really... Okay, so now we missed it. Yeah, we really should have gone over. We should have attacked the bishop this way. Okay. This attacks the bishop and the base of the pawn chain in the center of the board. We gave our opponent an out. Yeah, see, this bishop should have retreated back at this point in time. Maybe even offer a queen trade just to try to slow down the attack some, possibly. But unfortunately, yeah, my opponent made... a worse move, and then I was debating on, yeah, I'm glad I didn't go for that. So I was debating on this move here. So queen capture on b2, not a great move, but the idea was it comes with check, picks up a free pawn, and it continues checking the opponent. Moving the knight for a check is the best move, but the question is, why doesn't the engine like this to pick up the free pawn? Ah, right, because the bishop can retreat too. Right, so here's another lesson. Calculating one more step, right? Finding that next move. What's just the one more next move, right? So I saw a one move tactic. I should have just looked, all I had to do is look two moves. One move tactic, what's my opponent's possible responses? Well, I should have seen that. That's an obvious defensive strategy and I should have seen it. But at that point in time, trading bishops would have been fine with me. Yeah, here it does say the queen grabbing the pawn is a good move. Try to scare your opponent off of this bishop, which in fact they did. Other moves that I could have considered, yeah, just trading the bishops. Knight f4. That I don't understand. What's the threat here? The threat is I've already got this square covered, so when I check, we're going to be rotating around. Okay, so there's the threat. So I didn't put that together. At this point in time, I just decided to continue with my advantage. And unfortunately, my opponent at this point in time needed to defend and save the bishop, so it would have been one of these two moves. But yeah, and then it just fell apart. Yeah, just leaving that pawn alone. See, this is what I was worried about, is what happens here. I have to keep moving the... Well, I guess there's no follow-up checks. What about this? Yeah, this is the thing that I was worried about is, do I put myself in a position where my opponent can really hurt me? And I don't... I mean, it looks like no. I mean, it's an ugly, ugly March of the King, but, you know, it's not the end of the world. And then, yeah, unfortunately, my opponent just dropped the threat that we had of this. Since the queen is blocking him, he needed to move the queen out of the way. And this would have been a perfect ideal here. This just made me a little nervous. And then this come over. So I probably would have gone backwards this way. No, because that allows this check. But yeah, okay, I could block. Yeah, I'm okay there. Okay. Alrighty, guys. Well, this was a fun one. I appreciate you sticking around. I still recommend the Italian game. I still think it's a fine opening. I think the only real negative that happened, I mean, you saw this game was really even until my opponent made this exchange. And it was just an unnecessary exchange. I think from here, my opponent should have continued developing. Castling is a good move. Defending this knight would have been fine. Yeah, maybe defending, maybe even going for some kind of attack like this. You know, bring the knight in like that. You know, maybe this knight ends up back here, or maybe it ends up like this somewhere. I don't know, but yeah, I think for this point in time, my opponent should just castle. Let's turn this off, yeah. You guys get the idea. Just castle or push to open up the bishop. Maybe even push to open up the bishop this way. I don't know. But castling and... yeah, I think that's just probably one of the, you know, the option for my opponent. And this would have been a very different game. I still recommend the Italian. I think the Italian's a fine opening. And I think that we have enough tools in our arsenal on how to play the Italian and play against the Italian. So I encourage you guys to go out there and play some chess. I really appreciate you sticking around, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.